Tech issues as an online teacher are the worst. When they're on your end, they can leave you feeling pretty unprepared or not worthy of being an online teacher. And I covered that last week. If you want it, I've got it linked for you. But if it's on your student's end, it can lead to a pretty rocky class. So I've taught online over 10,000 hours. I've seen some stuff. So today I'm going to lead you through some of my favorite ways of solving student tech issues quick and easy so that you can get your class back on track. Hey there, I'm online teacher Allison, and I teach stay-at-home moms how to teach online so they can earn an income from home. So when you've taught online as much as I have, you learn some things. That's just how it goes. And you're going to learn some things too. And tech issues for the students are just part of the territory. So some of the reasons they have tech issues, they're too far away from their router. They are in a rural area, so they don't get great internet. Their bandwidth is just bogged down. It's the same reasons your internet's not going to be great. Again, I mentioned those in last week's video, so go ahead and grab that if you haven't, and it'll help answer some of those questions a little more in depth. So here's some things you can do in the meantime. So here's some things you can do just as the online teacher and while you're talking to them to try to help get it back on track. The first thing that is really helpful that I don't love is turning off their video. You usually don't have access to that, but you can ask them to do it. I don't love this because I read their faces and it helps me gauge their understanding, and it also helps me gauge how focused they are. But if your class isn't going well and that's going to be what does it, then ask them to turn off their video. This is a great one-time solution. You can leave that in the feedback later and say the internet wasn't working great, but turning off the video helped. Is there any way you can move them closer to the router? Can you change their device so it's a little more built for online learning? Can you send other family members off of the internet for the 30 minutes that we have class? All of those things will help. And if you have really great communication with the parents, then that is something you can leave for them to hopefully help the rest of your classes go easier. I did have one student, he lived in rural Canada. That's all I knew. And they couldn't upgrade their internet. There wasn't much more they could do. So we just turned off the camera. He was very focused. It never hindered class because his camera was off. And we had great lessons. They worked through their package and they were done. So that is one thing to keep in mind. Everyone was aware of it and we just did the best we could in that situation. Another thing you can ask them to do, this is actually my favorite. This is the first thing I always do. I ask them to refresh their screen. And then if that doesn't work, leave and come back. And if that doesn't work, log out all the way and come back in. So I teach on platforms. And so they have to log into the class. They have to log into the platform. And from there, they click on our scheduled class together. And that's what connects us. And usually a refresh button will work, but if it doesn't, I tell them, okay, log all the way back out. Close out of that window, sign in again. I will wait for you, but see if that helps. And it usually does. Usually it comes back and their connection is so much better and class runs so much smoother. It doesn't always work, but that refresh button can kind of be a quick reset just to get you through the last couple minutes of class if you need it. In my math classes, we've actually been doing this a lot because they are in a classroom full of other kids doing the same thing. They are all in their own math small group. I have 4 or 5 kids, and then there's a bunch of other tutors like me who also have 4 or 5 kids. So the kids, these kids are in America, so we speak the same language. They're saying, my internet is slow. And honestly, there's not a whole bunch we can do in that situation. So the refresh, leave and come back really helps us because it helps their computer kind of wake up and reconnect if it needs to. Another thing I like to ask them to do is ask them to move closer to the router. Now, when you say router, most kids don't know what you're talking about. I didn't really know what a router was until I was in high school. So I kind of have some kid-friendly words. I say like the internet box, where the internet comes from. And I always, always, always say, hey, go get mom, go get dad. And we try to work through it together, because the closer they are to the router, the better their connection is. I've mentioned it a lot here that I have one sitting right here on the corner of my desk. It actually plugs right into my computer. So I don't even teach over Wi-Fi. I teach over that blue cable. I don't even know what it's called. And that's how I connect to my classes when I am at home. So if you are teaching ESL, then there will be a language barrier there. And that is where Google Translate is your friend. I always had it up in a separate window for these more common things. One thing I recommend is creating a Google Doc, and then you type it in English, and underneath you can have the translation in whatever their native language is. I taught on VIP Kid, it was almost all Chinese students. So I just had those ready to go in Chinese. But in other platforms like Cambly, you will have many different nationalities, many different languages. So that's where it might just be easier to plug it into Google Translate, copy and paste. Cambly, what I also really like about them is they have a translation service within their chat. So they can type to me in Turkish, and I can hit the translate button and it'll translate me. There's no copying and pasting that I have to do. VIP Kid, it needed copying and pasting, so that was a pain. But that is something to think about if you do have a language barrier, as a way to kind of overcome it, or show pictures. You can have printouts, because mine's like tucked behind my monitor, so I can't even put my camera on it. So that is one thing you can do. The fourth thing I try to ask them to do is change devices if it's possible. So when I first started teaching online, I actually have it here with me. I was teaching on this clunky Dell, and it was cheap. I bought it at Costco. And at the time, I wasn't buying it to teach online. I was just buying it for our own use. So it didn't have really the specifications that you need for teaching online, like the RAM and the gigabytes and the core processor inside it. It was just too slow. So what really worked for me was changing devices. One of the first things I did when I started teaching online was I upgraded my computer to a MacBook Pro. And it served me well. I am actually still using that Mac. It's what I'm using right now. And yes, it was expensive, but I took the money out of savings. And as I got paid, I think it took me like 3 months to put that money back into our savings account. So I was able to pay ourselves back. Another thing you can do is you can save if your computer is kind of functioning. My computer was not functioning. So all that to say, if your students have the same sort of clunky device that isn't working, maybe they can change it. Sometimes tablets work really well because they don't have all of the extras. On the other side, they don't have all of the extras. So if you require it, it might not work. Some platforms work on it, some don't. So that's really where you learn what you are doing and where you're teaching, and it helps you understand if you can even recommend that or if it's not a good idea. One other thing I like to have them do is switch their internet. So sometimes they're connecting on their phone, and we all know hotspots aren't great. We all know public spaces aren't great. And sometimes they're doing it because they're in a pinch, because their internet is down at home, because they're traveling. And that's where you extend grace, especially if your students are like regular students of yours and you know. And I've also mentioned this as kind of a internet alternative for you if your internet is out for whatever reason. I always recommend a hotspot. I connect to my hotspot on my phone. Otherwise, if it's safe, I can go to the library, I can go to Starbucks, sit in the parking lot, that kind of thing. And that could be what they're doing. But if they are on their phone and they have the internet at home or vice versa, recommend that too. See if you can troubleshoot with that as well. And finally, sometimes all these things just don't work. Maybe the kid isn't trying it. Maybe they're not understanding what you want them to do. Maybe it's just a bad internet day. I know sometimes I just have bad internet days for no reason, and I blame it on the solar. Whatever, it's just out of my hands. So they muddle through. And you make a note of that for yourself and for the parent and for the platform or the company if you teach for one. You just say, hey, internet was not great today. We tried A, B, C, D, and it didn't help. We'll try again next time. And I don't love it. I know those are really hard to teach, and it leaves you feeling kind of yucky and nervous about a bad review, but I want you to remember that it is not your fault. You did everything you could, and that does not make you a bad teacher. It is what it is, and it's something you get used to as you teach online. All right, it's short and easy. Those are my 6 favorite ways of solving internet troubles when we come across them in our online classes. Sometimes they just happen and we just roll with the punches, and it is what it is. So I hope you loved this one. Remember to like and subscribe. And if you are looking to get started, head on over to the link in my description. It has a complete guide to getting you started to teaching online, from making the decision of what you want to teach, who you want to teach, where you want to teach, and how to do it. If that's at onlineteacherallison.com/platform. It's completely free. It's a PDF download, and it's all designed to help you get the best start possible. I hope you're having the greatest week ever, and we'll chat soon. Bye.